going home with me because we got a freezer full, so. Yeah.
Right, well, like we got a quorum. In fact, we got everybody. All right, so we'll go and call the order. 5:01 p.m.
Ooh.
Roll call, we're all in attendance. Everybody had a chance to review the agenda?
Yep.
Any objections to the agenda as written?
Yeah.
And once going twice sold, seeing no objections. The agenda will use. We had a chance to review the minutes. Previous meeting.
Yes.
Any modifications or objections to the minutes as written?
None here.
All right. Hearing no objections or modifications in the minutes, previous meeting passed written. Items of business. Well, first thing on the list is committee of the whole. Actually, motion.
I'd like to make a motion to proceed in committee of the whole.
Seconds.
I'll second.
Any objections? All right. Hearing none, we're down to committee of the whole. All right, Tina, tell us some things.
All right. Woo, this has been a fun ride as far as organizing. I feel for you more, Peter, now, after you're working on the tables and stuff and playing with that. So what I'm gonna do is everyone should have received an email, and the people in the room, you have handouts. So there's 5 motions on a piece of paper. There's the current outline, the proposed outline, and then there's the reso itself. And what this is what I call the clean version, the one as if all the changes that were proposed in the strike through and underline one in the package were accepted and everybody's in agreement with them. Obviously, you can bring up anything you're not in agreement with, but that's the way the motions are drafted, and that's the way that attachment, and I'll pull it up and share it as soon as I see. Just see if I can pull it up, make sure you guys can see it. Oops, that's the rest of those.
Can I ask you a question about motion 1, or is that's a, okay.
But yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so can you guys on Teams see the draft reso?
Yes.
Yes.
So I just thought it would be easier if we just went through and hit each individual item. Now, your motions that are in that separate document are tied to the line numbers in this document that's on the screen.
So this one, the screen has a handwritten comments.
It does. So I'll kind of briefly.
That's intentional.
It is.
Okay.
So let's see if I can shrink this down. So anything that's in red, or most of these little changes, are just letting you know those are some grammatical changes that were done as we're going through the document. Any of those I don't have as part of the motions because they're more formatting and organizational type things. What you have as motions are the more substantive things. And I think the first one, again, just combining stormwater throughout. Some of it's just wordage. The first one is on page 73 of 107, if you're using the document that was in the email.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a cleanup, but I just wanted to make sure it's a double item. Let's see, how do I shrink it Okay, so up above is this one. So F talks about legal nonconforming, multifamily commercial outside the downtown overlay. This G is supposed to say the same thing. So it may not be an actual motion. No, it's not a motion because it doesn't say it, but I at least wanted to call it out, let you know that in the next draft that'll go to the planning commission, it'll duplicate that language. And I'm looking to take G and merge it down with waivers, because when you read them, both of them, the 1633.035 was moved from the back up to this section to call it out. But then when you read them together, they almost seem to be saying the same thing. So my goal is, unless there's any objections, to just merge those together. It's not that you guys need to make motions about, but I just wanted to get your agreement that that makes sense to you
That it
too.
is what it is.
Right.
Yep.
And then this one's the first one. So on page 74, under the landscape plan, there's still this, I don't know, is it a prepositional phrase? It was talked about, I think, at the last meeting or the meeting before. And it was like, how do you determine if somebody has the same expertise? How do you not? I couldn't remember how the group landed. I thought we landed on, no, we would take that out and just leave it for the large scale projects to be a landscape architect. But for the smaller ones, it could be anyone. But I wanted to put it out there for the group. So that's your first motion, number one, is to propose that deletion of that language that's in the draft, if you're in agreement with it.
And specific to this motion, since I am a professional landscape architect, I'll abstain from this unless there are any, if anybody has any questions or clarifications, but there's a conflict of interest for me within this motion.
See that both ways.
And this is probably more brought on by me than anybody else, but I felt that this was a conflict with state regulations to have the city planner approve if somebody's qualified to be a landscape architect. That's actually the state of Alaska's function.
And Tina, I believe the intent of this was it was giving it an alternate qualification rather than creating a direct comparison to landscape architect. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have to be careful how we word it for sure. The question is, so there's two things. One, we shouldn't have a city planner comparing qualifications to out there where that's not what she does. That's not fair to her or anybody else. But on the flip side, if we as a group want to propose that, you know, a landscape installer of 10 years experience is qualified to do this, we can do that. I'm not saying I agree with it, but that's the flip side. So
And I believe the way this exists is it's a professional, someone with a stamp. So this would be a civil engineer, survey, architect, someone that's already licensed by the state of Alaska is what the intent of this was previously, not necessarily that someone would be a non-professional.
right. So we either have to define who those professionals are and let the state sort it out.
But I think your statement there, Peter, was incorrect in that I think that the flexibility was for those other licensed professionals, but also for landscaping companies, you know, similar to the way electrical, mechanical do it. You know, there's sometimes you get a building package put together for like single family residence. You don't have to go to an ME or an EE in order to get those systems designed. The licensed contractor can basically do that design for you. I think that was the idea behind this statement.
It's just
And
where-
probably the semantic on that is prepared and sealed. Only licensed professionals can seal drawings. So that's probably that's why I thought that it was a existing
I got you.
professional.
Yeah, you can't leave it the way it was written and have it be okay with the state.
Right.
No. So what I'm trying to say is the way it's written is compliant with the state. It's exerting a slightly higher level of requirement than the state currently does, which is fine.
Yeah, then I guess I
What
understand.
is the state's wording?
Well, so the state doesn't necessarily have wording. The state is the licensing authority for landscape architects and other design professionals. Architects, civil engineers, surveyors were typically the people that signed these previously. And that so they're prepared. They sign and seal their own drawings. And this language is just saying that it's a landscape architect or a existing professional as licensed by the state of Alaska who has similar experience. The issue with this kind of wording was that it used to kind of be relevant when landscape architects first got licensed. But now that we've been licensed for 25 years, I think, this kind of individual doesn't exist as much anymore.
Is it too vague to say a licensed professional?
If you say a license.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is too vague because licensing with the state of Alaska also relates to hairdressers and other professionals that have public health, safety, and welfare.
I just feel like is that an added cost that
Well, if you
could
get,
be,
if you get over
done by-
5,000 square feet, this is what we're talking about. If you get over 5,000 square feet, there's a drop in the bucket.
that should be part of the,
Should be part
so
of it.
then what does he say that the state has a slightly less guideline?
Well, what they're saying is here, so if you're over 5,000 square feet, you got to get a landscape plan. It needs to be done by, and our words are sealed by a licensed landscape architect. So sealing is a legal term.
Okay.
And that's the end of my understanding. The rest of the room can tell you more.
The way professional licensing works is that if you might be like, for me, I'm licensed as a civil engineer, but I might have expertise with other fields. And I can still stamp like structural or landscape if I have the required knowledge to be able to know what I'm doing. I can stamp that as a civil engineer. That's what is currently afforded in the code and it's being removed because it's not really very commonly done for the most part.
Who's seen anybody besides a landscape architect do a landscape plan for the last 5 years? How common is it?
I have,
I have to.
but it wasn't a
Yeah.
requirement that it was stamped by a landscape architect. It was
Correct.
just landscape plan.
Yeah, I used to have architects do it all the time before. Because prior to the 2006 code did not require a landscape architect, no matter what size. In 2017, it was put in to require if you were 5,000 or greater, you had to have a licensed landscape architect. So prior to that, we had civil engineers, we had but it was most commonly architects that would do it.
And how did you feel the outcome was that as far as professionalism and quality and, I mean, what do you think, Gina, as the person who sees them?
It varied, and I think the biggest thing, it wasn't, I mean, the plan is the plan, so a lot of it's just numerical. But what I think the landscape architect brings to the table that maybe an architect, and again, that's why it was left open. Maybe you're an architect that's been doing this for 15 years and you do have that depth of experience. Or maybe you're a horticulturist or you're a landscape contractor that's been in the business and designed landscape plans for properties, in the borough that doesn't have a requirement. You could have some expertise. What I found with some of the other professionals, I had some surveyors and engineers and architects. What they didn't understand was the type of plants in the right environment.
Okay.
And I would have flowers proposed that say they only grow in shade, but yet the site was going to be in full sun.
Gotcha.
So it's that knowledge and understand what plant's going to thrive in what location, so really, was it necessary that I do that? I mean, really, that's kind of up to the person who hires that professional to draw it up for them to make sure they're
And then
getting a quality
they
product.
install it per plan or
Correct.
just wander off and from Marigold to them.
And
So-
two other benefits that come out of it as well is that because we are focusing on this code all the time, we tend to be able to navigate the clients through it because there's still complexities within the code, whether it's conditional use plans or otherwise. So by having a professional involved, it often serves the client better because you have someone with particular niche expertise. And then beyond that as well, we do catch life safety issues or other things when we look at plans, because one of the benefits is when you have a civil engineer, surveyor, landscape architect, and architect, we all look at things differently. So between the disciplines, clients get to be pretty well covered for not making expensive mistakes.
Andy, you sound like you're going to say something.
Well, my concern with this is that the definition of landscape architect, the definition of architect, the definition of engineer has quite a bit of, well, especially the definition of minor engineering related to, I mean, architects can do structural engineering if it's of a minor nature to the project. Civil engineers, mechanical engineers can do minor architectural work. I've seen it done. If it's if it's minor to the project, I don't know if anybody has ever. Well, I do know of some people who've gotten in trouble by practicing way outside of their license. But my concern is that, yeah, there were architects and there are engineers who did landscape design. But now that definition of where that cutoff point is has been muddied. And my concern is that number one, as approved by the city planner, I've looked at similar language in other zoning ordinances, and they basically stop it at landscape architect registered in the state of Alaska for certain size projects. They don't give you that option of a professional with similar landscaping expertise.
Yep. Anchorage moved that 8 years ago.
Yep. And the definition, I was reading back on frequent questions asked or whatever a few years ago about, well, where does landscape architect, where does their responsibility come in, and when is it just somebody planting grass in their yard? And the definition I saw was that anytime it affects the health, safety, and welfare of the public, a landscape architect is supposed to be involved as far as the landscape design goes. And then they said, well, when does the health, safety, and welfare of the public become involved? And the answer I found was anytime you do anything that involves landscape architecture. So it was kind of it was kind of a catch-22 thing. And my concern is that I don't think the state regulation has addressed if architects are even allowed anymore to practice do any landscape design on their projects. I was out of state when the change occurred, so I really didn't follow it too much. But when I came back, I was told, well, architects, if you've been practicing it, you can continue to do it. Well, I can't find anything in the code anymore, in the regulations, that says that's true. Basically, if it involves the aesthetic layout of a piece of property, trails, all this other kind of stuff, that's landscape architecture, and architects aren't permitted to practice that unless they want to take the risk of having the state licensing board look into what they're doing. So that's my concern, is that I know other jurisdictions have tightened it up, and I'm more or less looking at this as a way of reducing the potential for a licensed professional getting himself in trouble, as well as taking the responsibility off the city planner as determining if that person has the expertise or not.
So just for numbers, if you're building a 4,800 square foot building and your construction costs are $200 a square foot in your dreams, you're still coming in about at $1 million project. Hiring a landscape architect, maybe not, maybe not. And at 4,800 square feet, you're not even required.
Right.
So you get to 5,000. Now you're well over $1 million. If you can't handle like landscape architect, you probably shouldn't build.
Right.
And this was proposed, this wasn't my proposal, although it has my title written all over it. It was the planning commission at the time that they added a landscape architect. That was a proposal at the time. And they're like, yeah, but what if there's somebody else? I don't know. There might be someone who can do it cheaper. What can we do? And this was one of those forward and up type things.
Well, to be honest with
figure it out.
Tina, there are, you know, it's the same thing as like we were just talking about somebody designing your electrical or your mechanical system for a single family or a two-family residence, somebody who's not required to be licensed. In fact, the state fire marshal or the local fire marshal, I'm not so much sure the state does it anymore, but they have been known to do this in the past. If it's a small project, you can get somebody who has an electrical administrator license, which is basically the subcontractor, the guy who's qualified. And he has to take his light test and get licensed and have an administrator level license. Same thing with electrical. They can design build your system. And what the state has required in the past is that you have a floor plan, and then you have the mechanical administrator or the electrical administrator submit their scope of work under their seal, and they have a seal, and they'll accept that in lieu of having it engineered and stamped by a licensed engineer. So there's all sorts of gray areas in there, and depending on the scope. But my issue has always been, I have not seen a cutoff where this, if something is required to be, if it's a non-residential project, and the state of Alaska has determined non-residential projects as being a duplex and a single family residence, then anything bigger than that, you're required to have sealed drawings. And so that, to me, is where that requirement comes in, is if you're required to have sealed drawings for your project, landscape architects should be included as one of those people that are sealing drawings.
So I think 5,000 square feet is a good cutoff.
And just out of curiosity for this discussion, is there anyone in the room that would not support this motion? Or, I'm going to abstain again, but is there anybody in here that would not support it?
For me at this point, scope wise, I think it's a nice cutoff. Because at some point you got to say, okay, your professionals should get involved.
Yeah, you're kind of cutting it off where the state cuts off the requirement for sealed drawings by licensed professionals anyway.
Great.
Good.
All righty then. So move on.
And then Tina, then, so should we be voting on each motion at the time, or do these at the end of the meeting in retrospect?
We have to wait till after the committee of the whole. But
Okay, thank you. Okay, perfect, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, that's my point of view.
This will just make it easier when you're ready to adopt the reso. You won't have to talk about the questions as much because you've already done it now.
When you hash it all out, you can combine.
Thank you.
And do it in a lump. So vote twice.
So the next one on number 1B1 is just, again, it's clarification, and actually what it is under our site plan requirements, there are 2 hits for what requirements are for your landscape plan. So I copied it over. So it's not new language. It's actually already required. It's just hidden under your site plan checklist.
Oh,
So that's what that one is. So red's not a motion. It's just letting you know that I'm adding that in and why and where it came
where
from.
it came from.
And
And,
Tina, one thing you might consider for that is that whether you add a line 2 that says, because it's a type of dimension, so you might say dimensions shall include square footages of code required areas or something like that.
Okay.
they're good. Later on.
So when it says calculations, dimensions, it says then comma dimension of landscaped area. So say required landscape area or area.
Calculations, dimensions, notes, and details necessary to describe the landscape elements. And then, because what you're looking for is what you've asked for in the drawings, right? You're looking for the dimensions of the square footages that contribute to meeting requirements, and
Right.
the dimensional widths and lengths.
Okay. All right. Well, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So on this, what I would say maybe would be calculations, comma, dimensions, comma, dimensions as needed to illustrate meeting code requirements. Because right now, dimension of landscaped area, somebody might forget, it's not a square footage, or they might just put a dimension on it. So it maybe specificity is beneficial.
Okey-doke, got it.
That's right, Peter's.
So then the next one, again, is just, it was already. I think I didn't catch this one. So it was talking about a readable scale. I'm trying to remember if it was in there originally. I saw Anchorage said not smaller than 1 inch equals 30 feet, which is pretty, that it doesn't become legible when you get smaller than that, really. So then I just carried that down here, just because there was a scale down here too.
Yeah.
And then for whatever reason, and all the versionings Tahara and I worked on, we still managed to leave this one out. So I'm adding it back in. It's what was talked about at the last meeting. It just didn't make it. So you don't need a motion on that one. The motion number 2, if you go to your motion list, is to add that phrase there. That's on your motion list, which says areas to be excavated or filled, proposed finished grades and contours, drainage directions, and any control structures to be installed. And again, this is the second one that's required under site plans to be shown on your landscape plan. So I'm just carrying it over here. And then ultimately, when I revise site plans, I'll strike the landscape plan requirements from that one. But I may actually go back and have the planning commission clean it up as part of this. You guys don't need to focus on that, but I just wanted to let you know. So if you saw something, we do need to make a motion since it's a whole different thing, but it's not new language. It's just copying it over for clarity.
Do you want that on the landscaping plan, or do you want it on the site plan, or you just want it?
Well, right now, the site plan checklist it may have some duplication. But right now it says, and if a landscape plan is required, you have to do these 2 things, which was the previous one we talked about in this one.
Okay.
So it appears they want it on the landscape plan. Personally, as a planner, I'll take it on any plan as long as it's shown. I'm not that picky, but
Get it here.
yeah. So that's what that one is. And then this one here is just again letting you know about the change. And it said developer, but I did the word search and it actually says lot owner.
Could you add, sorry, to that
Yeah.
motion, number 14, similar to number 12, it says unless shown on civil drawings? Is there a portion of that might?
Hey, you can put that in there.
Make it easy.
Then as long as
We're on the civil drawings,
Yeah. So I do know what you're getting at there. Like you want to be able to, the special landscape architect needs to be able to look at the grade and what's going on and drainage, all that kind of stuff. But
It's on another sheet.
yeah, I don't know that we want to muddy up the landscape drawing with all this other information that may or may not be pertinent to the landscaping.
So for verbiage to match what we have in our code, it should say unless shown on site plan. Because the site plan is your civil, but the code references it as all as site plans. So
Well,
yeah, I wrote it down and I can hand it to you.
Unless
The motion.
otherwise shown. So
is that a change that also needs to happen on item number 12 then? Because the item 12 shows unless shown on civil drawings.
you know, say that.
This one here. Oh, got it.
So that
Yep.
should that unless shown on site plan?
Yeah, it really should
So we'll make.
but I can do that one. You don't have to, those are kind of
Yes.
wording changes. If you want me to do that. Yeah, it doesn't change the intent. I'll just put site.
But when we make our motion for the change to that language, we're appending the end of that sentence with unless shown on site plan.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then I'll do the other one as part of what we submit to the planning commission. So down. Oh, so this one, I don't think it's major, but again, I wanted to call it out to you. So we added back the 15%, took it out of the table, put it back in the language. Peter had given how to measure that. If there's other areas that aren't part of the required landscape areas that have grass, he came up with the calculation, everybody agreed to it, of 1 tree per 1,000 square feet. I just was going to add the clarification in addition to the lawn. So that somebody doesn't think you can just leave it dirt or gravel or something underneath it. It's a tree within your lawn area.
Got it.
So,
And then for semantics, because I think that we use ground, it might need to be expanded beyond lawn because the conditions on a site are ground cover, turf, or mulch, or what's the normal designation?
Well,
well, it's right above, well, it does say plan with grass or a similar ground cover to create a lawn. That's where I stole the word lawn from, was from the
create-
previous sentence.
A lawn, okay. And then, and from a semantic perspective, is lawn in the definitions? I don't have those in front of me. It probably is.
Maybe.
Okay.
I'll look
That
real
would just,
quick.
that would just be something to check. Thank you.
But you could even just change lawn out to a solid vegetated mass or something.
Yeah, actually, lawn is defined as a managed area planted with grass that's typically maintained with a lawnmower and is used for aesthetic and recreational purposes.
So lawn,
Clear.
so lawn might not be appropriate then.
Yeah. So if you just change it to a solid vegetated mass,
Why?
something.
So what would you cover it if it's not grass? So you can have a lot that you've disturbed the entire lot. I mean, a parcel, you've disturbed the entire area, you've cleared everything off. 15% has to go back in landscaping. There's gonna be more than there's that left over typically, especially on a larger site. And that's what this is dealing with, is saying if they're disturbed, you gotta cover them with something. So if I were in Florida, I'd say, yeah, there's probably some other options. Or if I was in Arizona, I'd say there's other options. But in Alaska, what else is the go-to for
or
covering up disturbed areas?
I think it's probably just
Yeah,
a semantic because lawn is maintained. So planted with a grass or a similar ground cover to create, and again, I would, say what
Well-
Marie said, create a continuous vegetated surface.
But this is an area that we want them to be able to use as part of their total landscape area for the lot. So don't we want it to be maintained? And that seems to be what the difference in the semantic is whether or not it's maintained, right?
Not necessarily, because we can do like vegetated swales and stuff that are no-mow revegetation mix, and it's just native grasses. So it's not necessarily maintained, but it's a solid vegetated mass.
Well,
Well,
and
right, what I'm saying is the lawn area is maintained though. By calling it a lawn, you're expecting it to be maintained, right?
yes, lawns are typically mown, and maybe we just avoid this by saying areas must be planted with grass or a similar ground cover, period, and just end it there.
Then you're probably gonna want to amend the sentence in front of it or just above it, where it says all other disturbed areas on the site that are not part of the required must be planted with grass or similar ground cover. That's probably where you want to strike to create.
Minimum of-
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
that's what-
that's the one that I meant was to strike to create a lawn. So it just so the sentence for all other disturbed areas on the site that are not part of the required landscape areas must be planted with grass or similar ground cover, period. If the disturbed areas include a minimum of 1 tree per 1,000 square feet, in addition to grasses or a similar ground cover, the area may apply. So you just use the same language.
So we get rid of the additional one and we get rid of to create a lawn.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah, the first one's not problematic. The second one counts, like Tim said, counts towards your 15%. So it's supposed to be a manicured, groomed, maintained area. It's not supposed to be a wild.
That's what my thought would be there, is that if we're counting it towards your minimum area to be landscaped, then it should be something that is being maintained.
Kind of like
Um,
what Walmart does.
No?
This would create complexities on larger sites where existing native areas, or if they're trying to do a revegetation, it limits flexibility if you're going to say that it needs to be maintained and manicured, because typically on a project we'll have some areas that are a no-mow grass mix, in addition to a mown grass mix.
But are you trying to use that as your 15% of the total area landscapes? Typically not,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yes. So for a given project, if it's, it says 15% of native vegetation or a restoration type approach, that counts per code currently.
Yeah,
Right.
especially if you're doing steep slopes, you don't want to be mowing them.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
just like.
But then I guess, but then the question becomes, do we want that to be allowed to be part of the 15% of lot?
Yeah,
Landscaping.
'cause sometimes your whole site is on a slope.
So think the corner of Cruzy, the Matsuel Foundation corner.
And otherwise it's becoming punitive. So if someone has 15% of existing vegetation, if they wanted to use that to count toward code, they would need to mow it. And I don't think that's consistent with City of Wasilla's desires to maintain existing vegetation.
We just want you to look at, on the dirt pad.
Well, yeah, but
How do you say no dirt pad?
no, unmanicured lawn can look pretty bad too.
True. True.
I don't know. I'm not saying I want it to be in there. I'm just saying
Gotta be clear.
Yeah.
that's
And-
the issue.
Since us being in the home run as well, I think that if we did leave it where it did not reference lawn, that would be consistent with current code.
Okay, so to create a lawn, I've already got a line through that as a placeholder. The next sentence says if the disturbed areas include a minimum of 1 tree per 1,000 square feet. This is in the area that has ground cover. So then it should at least say in addition to the ground cover.
Yeah,
Yeah, so and I'll read out my recommendation as well. If the disturbed areas include a minimum of 1 tree per 1,000 square feet, in addition to grasses or a similar ground cover, the area may apply. And it's just basically copying grasses or similar ground cover to be identical in usage to the previous sentence.
sense.
You don't have to mow this, but you get credit for this. Make it look good.
And typically, and this is where we're getting to the lowest common denominator. Typically, clients or sites, people like to mow lawns, or they get the pressure to keep them mown. So unless they truly have a native forest area, people like lawns.
Yeah, but the native forest area would count toward their 15%, so they probably wouldn't need this lawn area. But
Yes, yeah. So what I mean is, unless they have a native forest area, people seem to tend to mow lawns.
sure, we'll go with that.
In general.
Yeah.
Which side of my fence
Well,
here?
and this is completely tangential, but and I can't remember. You guys have a nuisance. Do you guys have a nuisance landscape
No.
code?
No.
Okay. I think we had talked about that at one point, hadn't we?
Yeah, so no, we don't, so.
Okay.
Hence we get some odd things. So the next change is this one, it was just, I went and pulled, we had it in a paragraph, I went and pulled it out and tabbed it like Anchorage does, just to make it easier. Ended up with a weird sentence, so rather than kept this one tabular, just rolled these around, so really that's just.
Yep. My only recommendation to that would be to say 6 feet in height, rather than just crossing out with a. So 6 feet in height, period, and then evergreen trees must have.
But it already says the side, okay, 6 feet in height.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be consistent with the other items above it.
Okay. Oops, so motion number 3 has to do with the ground cover and mulch. So on page 83. Motion 3. So the proposal is just to strike the word mulch. And undeveloped areas of a lot. This one may actually can go away because it actually ties to the one we just spent all that time talking about a lawn.
Just did that.
So mulch isn't an option because it's supposed to be grass or some kind of
Something.
lawn type thing. So I can look at this. I mean, if you guys are comfortable with me just making the language match, or we can just strike the word mulch, because it does say living ground cover, or we can use the language that's or similar.
Yes, I think you're right. Is reconciling this what we just talked about makes us a good sense. And then just to be very clear, if a person is not putting in a planting bed or miscellaneous landscape, or parking perimeter, or asphalt, anything that doesn't have an obvious and clear use needs to be a living ground cover or grass or turf.
Change the word mulch to grass? Or should we
No,
say?
no, I did. Sorry, no. Whatever reconciles it. I like living ground cover, because
Just
living
like
ground cover
area-
might solve what we just talked about as well.
So we could strike turf too, because turf is a living ground cover.
Yep. And then within the definitions, if there's not a definition for living ground cover, that would be a good place to say, that's lawn or turf or unmown grasses, that would spell it out.
Weeds.
Good weeds.
We don't allow those kind of weeds in the city.
And then what, so this strikes motion 3 then as an unnecessary motion?
You're gonna remove 2 words.
Yeah, it's kind of a cleanup to make it match the other. If you're comfortable with that, you don't have to make a motion, or you can make a motion.
Or you just urging.
I
Yeah.
concur that it seems to be reasonable for you to reconcile that.
Yeah, that looks good to me.
Yeah, knock it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if we're doing up here like we did all the rest of it, so there's no argument.
Got my note there. Oh, so then the second half of that conversation, again, it has to do with mulch. Somewhere through all the iterations, there was a conversation of within the perimeter landscape bed. I guess it would actually be in the park and termination islands, any of these planting beds. There was a talk about how much, put a limitation on rock mulch, an area, limit it to an area. I seem to recall 30%, but I wanted to bring it up for the group to come up with a final answer.
I
Or
think
do you just want-
I'd pulled that out of the air. I would be fine with including something like that, recognizing that when we start to do plans, we might recognize that it's not great. Marie, or Tim, or someone else has worked on these plans. Do you think that's a fair place to start?
I think
I want to go higher than that, but
I agree too. With the amount of wind we get out here, most of the time, the beds that are some sort of light mulch, they just
Yeah.
get blown away and then nobody maintains them. So they look terrible.
Well, and what this also changes is we're allowed to use grass within our planting beds now.
right.
So in
Yeah,
theory, within theory, let's say you have 1,000 square feet of perimeter planting bed, and you've got lawn as 50% within that bed area between and amongst the trees, and then the other 50% is rock mulch. That seems to be viable. What do you
So,
guys?
yeah, this is the change here in yellow.
Yeah.
So this is where it says you can now choose any kind of living ground cover, turf, or mulch. So all of the vegetative, the decorative grasses, any kind of creeping ground covers, those kind of things all count, whereas before they weren't all options.
I think based on my experience, I think I would be happy with 30 or with 50. I think 50 gives a bit more flexibility, maybe.
Right, yeah, my thought was with 30, it might be too little to give yourself, areas around the plantings, right?
Yeah.
I would agree. I think 50% is a little bit more manageable.
Okay. And that's up to 50%. So.
Yeah.
So that one I didn't call out as a motion. So we should actually add that one as a motion. Or unless the group's okay with it being under committee, I mean, it's not in there right now, so I'm hesitant to just drop something in. Like if somebody were following all the actions that the group took, they'd be like, where'd that come from?
So Tina, to create craft wording for this, is the intent of it, rock mulch shall account for no more than 50% of surface area within required planting beds. That would be consistent, I think. Is that would anybody object to, do you think that's good wording if we need a motion?
I think it's good wording, period. And the truth is, it's, how we get there is kind of a little bit semantical as well. You can tag it in with another one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to combine them all at the end, you could just label it number 6. This could be number 6. So what you say?
Change number 6. So don't call them motions, call them changes. And then you can make a motion to change numbers 1 through 6.
Or could we just change motion 3 to change to this? We're getting rid of that altogether, right? Anything,
So
whatever.
if we just make a list of changes, make a motion to approve changes number, blah, 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 and out we go.
So
Yeah,
Peter, can you read that once more, please?
If only I'd written it down.
Okay, I can get you started because I got most of it. So you said
Okay.
rock mulch shall account for no more than 50%.
Rock mulch shall account for no more than 50% of the square footage of this. Oh, damn. Not just not gonna be able to get it right again.
You said surface area, 50%.
So 50% of the surface area for square footage square footage requirements within landscape beds,
There you go.
I think.
Yep.
Okay, so rock mulch shall account for no more than 50% of the surface area
And
in
square footage is
required
redundant.
landscape beds.
Yes, because square footage is not, since we say area, we're good.
So not surface area square footage.
Yeah, just surface
Square foot-
area.
Okay, but 50% of the surface area of the required landscape beds.
That sounds correct,
Okay.
I think.
So just thinking about this and being a little bit of devil's advocate, is that too vague in that it makes it sound like only the 50% of your landscape area on the site?
That's why I meant within the required 50% of the surface area within required landscape beds.
Okay.
So if you're outside your
Again,
required
like-
beds, you can put the rock mulch to be
Right.
decorative as much as you want.
Well, and that's a good point, is that within required landscape areas, because the 15, if you're counting an area toward your 15%, you would also not want more than the 50%.
So another area to consider is we've used some of that required landscaped area for like water channels and stuff, little
Yeah.
stormwater conveyance and stuff, which really should have some sort of
Rock.
rock top dressing to keep you from having too much erosion.
And we haven't necessarily drawn a difference between decorative rock mulch and because that rock tends to be a little bit larger, but 50% for within our required landscape areas would give us more than enough amount probably for erosion control strategies.
Should there be an exception or unless required for
Erosion control.
as an on-site BMP or something like that?
Kim, do you think this? What do you think?
We've had that before. We've had this issue before.
So if we do that, you could easily create a loophole and then everybody said, well, I'm using it as a stabilization BMP. I can put it wherever I want.
Yeah.
The other issue is that if you say you have a 100 by 10 foot wide landscaping bed, by saying 50% of the required bed, you could do 50 feet of it, 10 feet wide with bark mulch, and then the next 50 feet, 10 feet wide with rock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gonna be that ghetto.
I'm just
And
saying.
what I'm expecting, is that we'll see more likely 50 feet of rock and 50 feet of grass, because my feeling is most people are going to try to get away from bark mulch.
Right. Yeah, but I just wanted to point out that, yeah, it's not necessarily gonna be done in a linear fashion. It could be You know what I mean? Like it's not consistently 50% as you move down the landscape bed.
Yeah, and that's the challenge of the code is
Right.
we can set it up, but somebody might just treat it as crappy design.
Yeah.
Now, one thing, if makes the committee feel any better with those, what is it, MP4 requirements, stormwater requirements that are coming down because of the borough now being considered an urban area. I think once we know what those standards are and what those requirements are, the community, meaning the licensed community that's doing those plans, the civil engineers are gonna be able to give feedback as to what kind. We're gonna have to make changes in our code anyway to incorporate those stormwaters so they can be incorporated as part of that. So it won't be like this is your only chance to touch it, and it'll probably be more real time anyway if we wait till we see what those standards are.
Okay.
So the borough's gonna become urban,
Yeah. So
federally
municipal.
regulated.
Yeah.
Really?
That's terrible.
Yeah, the last census they passed that.
Oh,
Threshold, oh my.
interesting. Even though we,
It's bad and now you get more federal oversight. It's good that they get more places for funding. They get the amount of funding they can get.
got it. Yeah,
More.
we want more stormwater control. Here's somebody to do it. Okay.
Somewhat.
Is it all census areas within the borough? Or
I don't know how it's set. I don't know.
Because-
For sure. I don't know if
In the
it's-
process of delineating those maps.
Okay.
It's on the borough's website for comment, so you should go look at it and see, because they're expanding out into future for 20 or 30 years.
Yes, it's the core area, I think is what it is, but they're expanding it, I think.
I mean, our borough is the size of West Virginia. You can't
Right.
call it
I don't think it's all. No, I think it's the
Core.
core.
That's basically between Palmer and Wasilla, and then going down KGB a certain distance, and even going up to Schrock, going that far
Oh.
north in some areas, and capturing that.
Does not surprise me. Not Wasilla I grew up, I can tell you that. It's not good or bad, it's just not. Well, you can ride it forward with cars, it was normal. All right.
So the next one are just some re-lettering to match the outline.
Yeah.
Just to keep them to make sense, organizational. The next one is motion 4, which has to do with fences.
Maybe which one?
You see, I left a big blank in your motion sheet because I'm not sure what to do here. When I read this, this reads to me like an exception, not code language. And Peter, I know you have language in your tables, but I'm not sure it quite captured it. So I just wanted to see if there's any input, feedback. Otherwise, you can leave it as is and we can. I know there's language in the tables, like I said, about fencing and things like that, but this just reads like an exception or an alternative design, maybe.
Yes, and the function of this is that if site conditions would make a fence silly because you already had a berm or a slope or something, that it means, so this is more of an exemption. Is exemption the right word? It's an existing condition.
How do you call it that? What do you do there? I mean, because if you're at the bottom of a hill, that's dumb.
I mean, maybe what we can do, Peter, is just move it into your table where it talks about fences.
Well, I think the reason that I may have put it here was the item above it is existing fences or walls. So existing fences or walls that are in good condition may be used to satisfy code requirements. This is kind of similar thing as this basically says if existing site features.
Yeah, and I think that should probably go below 5 because. Yeah. Things
So,
like
but that-
we should say fences, walls, and obscuring site features, and then go to the next one, and it would say existing fences and walls or site features.
Tina, I would probably defer to you. Where do you think this? So this is. I don't know if.
I
I
mean,
don't know
we
if it's
can
in the,
merge 4 and 5 together. I mean, they kind of look like they're dealing with 2 different thoughts right now because they're 2 different numbers. But really, it's all inclusive. So I kind of think maybe 5 should be the lead, at least as far as the header. And then I can play with the grammatical part of it as far as, but keep the content out of 4 and 5 and put it under 1.
Yeah, I agree with
item.
you. And then what it would become would become existing fences, comma, walls, comma, or site obscuring features.
Right. Yeah, that would be the header. So it'd be number 4, what you just said.
Yeah.
And then number 4, the text of number 4 would go down into what's now 5.
It would probably become the first sentence of number
Okay.
5 because it deals with fences or lawns. And then the things that were being described in number 5 really are the site obscuring features.
Okay. All right, then you don't need a motion, then it's just reorganizing, so. Take that from off.
And maybe the only question in this is, it goes back to the previous discussion, is since this one is open to interpretation, this may be the last place that we say has city planner determination. But because we're using existing materials, someone needs to give it a thumbs up.
Well, they should be bringing it in saying, I fulfilled it this way.
Yes, but it needs someone to give it a yes or a no.
Yeah, the city planner needs to give that a yes or no.
Right.
Yeah,
To affirm that it is fulfilled that
Right.
way.
right.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's not like saying it's just willy-nilly, it's,
So
You can do this if it's approved by the city planner.
Yes.
But yeah,
So then, Tina, based on if this is just kind of a rearrangement to get it consistent, that would remove the need for motion number 4.
Yes,
Okay,
Right.
perfect.
which says at the end of 5, it says, if the city planner determines that it meets or exceeds the purpose of the standards of the shut.
determines, that's the word. Well, proving you've determined
Keep
that
that it works,
the
right,
text.
right. So I think the language there, put them all together,
Yeah.
and say at the end.
Because it's,
Yeah.
approval almost is like a popularity contest. But determining, that's part of what you know today is to verify this side, met the plan. But yes, I want to determine.
and if city attorney doesn't agree, she'll edit it as she goes through, because there's a project they're working on to look at that kind of stuff. Right now, we've got all these weird hybrid permit types.
Yeah.
Use permits, elevated permits, all kinds of stuff, and although there's some criteria, they're very subjective. So it allows for a lot of political influence and pressure on the whoever sits as a city planner
Yep.
to try and elevate this one, not elevate that one. So they're looking to clean all that out. So if she sees anything that she's concerned about, that one may get touched. It's
Okay.
part of it, but
Well, which would be great,
Yeah.
but to me, if you say approval versus determine, okay, it has to be X high. Well, if it's standing here and stick up a ruler, yep, it's that high.
right.
It's not subjective anymore. It just requires a brain to go out and look.
So. And then the next one, I don't have it as a motion, but this spring line, I kind of Googled it online. I don't know what it means.
It's
So,
more to do with pipe. And it's the midpoint and halfway up the pipe, basically.
Yeah, we've used it for boulders, and I think if we were going to put a definition in,
yeah, one or the other, either.
I would recommend a definition because I really don't know any other. And Tim, maybe you'd have it's the horizontal midline of a boulder where the
Just say that.
where the longest circumference is.
Can we just
Or-
say that in a sentence?
Yeah, perfect. So
So the horizontal midline of a boulder measured at,
I'll just say Tim, do you have
Is it
recommendations for
Biden's
this?
portion?
No, not necessarily. It probably would be. I'm trying to think, I don't know.
Because the issue with boulder, so the reason we talk about a spring line on a boulder is if a boulder has a high spring line on it, it looks goofy if you put it into a site because it looks like it's just plopped there. You normally want to place it to the midline, but that can happen kind of anywhere along the height of the boulder. It's not as nice and neat as a pipe.
Wow.
I was gonna say, do we care?
But that's fair enough as well. I mean, that's yes. So how about we say as measured at the widest points?
Okay,
Because
the
you
only
can't-
reason oh, sorry, go ahead.
You're really just telling them where to measure the circumference, and typically you measure it around the largest circumference on the boulder.
And the only reason well, not the only reason, there's two reasons I'm pushing back, but they're related. Code compliance and landscape inspections.
Yep.
So unless my recommendation would be, that's a lot of man hours to now measure boulders, whereas before we just visually go, are there two boulders? Check, check.
Okay. What I would
Does
recommend
it matter
is,
that much?
no, it
Well-
doesn't. I would recommend striking as measured at the spring line. Because then they're measuring a circumference and they're gonna go for the biggest one they can to get it to count, and that's fine.
Yeah, I like that. I think that would work. Yeah.
And what I would say is then the last sentence would, when set with their, instead of spring line, just say horizontal midpoint.
That's
6
their
foot.
horizontal midpoint.
Tim, does that sound good?
I think so.
Is that, so that's a 6 foot
Yeah, it's
circumference, right?
And little smaller, 2-foot diameter.
Oh, okay.
So 5 is 3.14.
So it's 6 around.
6 is
I'm
about
just-
2 foot, or 9 is about
I'm 6 feet tall.
And
And
This
then
is
now
about
make a
6
circle.
feet.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
And
Well, that's not stupid, huge boulder.
No.
no,
Okay.
and Chris, for your benefit, is they've been standardized locally for quite a while. We call them type A, B, and C boulders. So this is consistent with local detailing.
Cool. I'm just sitting there thinking, wait a minute, what do I have? I'm like, can I hug it? Can I get, I mean, I'm trying to figure it out. Is it this? So if it's a 9-foot boulder, what does that look like?
About
It's about,
Oh,
yeah, Tim, yeah, about 3 feet radius or diameter, I mean.
that's not stupid huge either.
No,
I mean, it's
it's
a nice big
12
boulder.
foot 4. So, I mean, it's roughly, 3 feet. Or 3 is pi, right? 3.14. So
Yeah.
divided by 3, it's roughly the diameter.
A 6-foot boulder, depending on its shape, a guy can kind of roll it maybe, but could definitely not move it.
Yeah, you're using a bar.
Like 200-300 pounds.
Okay.
Ooh, more than I ever knew about boulders.
Well, I mean, that's why I wanted to ask, because I was trying to picture it, because, some of these subdivisions you roll up and they've got these boulders that are 6 feet tall and 5 feet wide. I'm like, how big is that?
Yeah, those are ones they dig up and they
They
leave
don't know
over
what
there
to do with
because
it.
they can't move.
They're rolling it with the excavator.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and that's because there's one of those in my neighborhood where they can see, they would, oh man,
Yeah.
what do we do with this thing? They're like, move it to the corner. Yeah, we found it in the foundation. This is as far as we can get it, leave it there. Got it.
Up there on Sun Mountain, they came in about 10 feet in diameter.
Oh, no.
And all that silt and that is big old giant rock. And they have the biggest, like 465 cat excavators, one of the bigger ones you see, around. They could barely even roll it with that thing. And
Just so they got it out.
yeah, put it down in the corner and covered it up.
Yes, there it is.
Yeah, just got it out of the way.
I don't know. I mean, if they're big enough, do you just build right on top of them
You
sometimes?
could probably, yeah.
Put it in the middle of your retention
Yeah.
pond.
It's off in the corner down. the bottom.
Diving, yeah.
So the turtles can, no, we don't have turtles, do
It's
we?
not exposed
Doug
now.
could stand on it.
We have some frogs. We have plenty of
That's
ducks.
frog. Little tiny frog.
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, all right, well, thanks. I appreciate that. So, all right,
So,
that makes it easier from an enforcement standpoint too, I think.
oh yeah.
Hopefully all the people doing this know what they're talking about, so.
Well, if you don't have arms, you can at least.
And this one's just reordering it because the checklist for the landscape plan says site distance triangle first, and I see people reference site distance triangles more than I know that clear vision area, clear visibility, that's kind of a secondary. So I just reorganized it. This required some renumbering. For some reason in your draft, again, I deleted it several times, but we are now in the cloud with Word, and if you do documents in Word with the cloud, be careful because it goes back to the old days. It will shut down your document and then you lose your edits. You remember the old day? Because it auto saves, but it doesn't auto save every time. So we've had a few difficulties with that. So if you're in the cloud like we are, keep an eye on your documents and,
I like Google Docs because I can look at every
Oh,
word
there
step
you
all the
go.
way
Yeah.
down through. It's no problem.
yeah, so we may have to go to something like that. So anyway, I'm striking it out again because it was moved to the beginning to its own placeholder. That one's just fixing some grammatical. Okay, your next one is dealing with types of landscaping. This is under site perimeter landscaping. Motion number 5 is to add exemptions. The only one I came up with was unopened right-of-ways or rights of way. This is not intended to be site perimeter landscaping if there's an unopened right-of-way. But if it is open, you need to do it. But I didn't know if you guys had any others that you thought should be added to that.
I didn't even think about that, but that's a good one.
Yeah.
Before. No. Shut up.
I think that makes sense because what that covers is that's typically the only adjacent public land that would get landscaping. So yeah, an unopened right of way makes sense.
Yeah, because who knows when it's ever gonna change. Before we get going, just a parliamentary thought. If we word the word motion up here, motion number 5, and go all the way back with the exception of the first one and call them change number 1 through, just leave motion 1 as 1. Because Peter already made it clear he's not gonna vote on it, which is fine. But if you take motion 2 and call that motion 2 change 1, and motion 3 change 2, change 4 or 3 or 5, then we can vote on this one time. Otherwise, you're gonna sit here and be in parliamentary hell for about 8 minutes.
And I would concur with you, Chris. If there's anything that we think might have a split vote or an abstention, that should be separate. But otherwise, if everyone is on the same page, having them in one motion makes sense.
Already discussed it. Somebody making a change now. But we'll split it out just because Peter wants to be clear, and I understand that.
Okay. So
I'm not sure.
I just had, you guys may see some changes to these tables and how they roll in the text, but not about the content. So I did want to ask the group. I know that was brought up at the last meeting that some of the tables may have been too wordy, and we now do have those introductory segments that talk about each one of these types. So the additional requirements for the optional design could go into text or they can stay in the table. We combined 2 columns together and took the intent out, which took away some of that language, and I think they're pretty good. That's why I kept them in there. I know Peter, you had said last time, tables, no tables, but I think it works now, even with the introductory, talking about site perimeter, referring to the table. You have your purpose, which is your intent up here. And then you have the bed width, location, plant materials. I have notes to say plant material requirements and quantification. So those again are just cleanups on that table, but I didn't know about these last 2 columns. If the group was okay with them staying in the tables, if it was helpful to leave them there, if you wanted them under the section that applies to it.
I think it table.
Yeah, I think it was.
Okay. All right, okay.
Thumbs
Any
up.
objections to him staying on the table?
Peter, did it seem to damage the intent of your tables?
Oh, no.
Oh.
Moving the intent out, I think, was a positive thing.
Okay. And then the next one, I don't think it needs to be here because that language is already here. I just kind of, I do need to strike yours. It'll be out of the one that the
Yep.
chair signs. Your notes anywhere where they're still threaded through here, we'll get those pulled out. And then I'm going to bullet these from where we combine the 2 columns. Oh, so this one is the next one to discuss. So it's under parking lot and vehicular. It's page 91.
This has 2 parts to it. One, the second half of this, if a slope works in the favor of a property, we dealt with that within the exemptions we talked about. So I think that goes away.
Okay.
But then the first part of this where we say, I think this would still be a good thing to do. And what this would be a lot owner can reduce their required planting width by 2 feet and take it down to 6 shrubs if a site obscuring feature is used that achieved this. And the reason for this was we had the extra width for 2 reasons. One was that they had space to allow a hedge or a fence, and also allow some snow storage on the back of curb. So if they provide something which reduces the need for that width to achieve it, we would give them 2 extra feet.
Yeah.
So if everybody's okay with it, I can just take Peter's initials out in the we discussed and just leave it as text.
So
Yeah,
just
with some,
double checking. So if we reduce that 2 feet, that your minimum planting bed width would go down to 7. Is that right? Or it's 5. From 7
it
down
would-
to 5.
yeah. So well, minimum average is 10, and then the minimum planting bed width would go to 5. Yes. Yeah.
I got
Each of
Minimum
those
average is 8, and then okay.
Yeah, it would go to 8 and 5. And then, so the main thing on this is, and just to verify, right now we've got 10 with a minimum of 7, with 10 shrubs per 30 linear feet.
Yeah.
Because we're expecting those shrubs to provide screening benefit.
Right.
If someone provides a berm or a fence or a wall or something, then the extra shrubs aren't needed. So it deletes 4 shrubs and it deletes 2 feet.
Yep. I like it. Yep. We're good.
So this one, it's just a note that the site enhancement, this is that 15% landscaping, it moved up into text, so. And we'll fix all the headers on the tables to make them all match, so that's really it.
Is this table going
Which
out
one?
of the other table?
This one here?
Yeah.
No, it stays here, it's kind of, it's not kind of, it's exactly in line with where Anchorage does.
Oh, okay.
So
So it's gonna stay there. The only reason I'm asking is the table number. Yeah, that would be.
Oh, got it. Okay. Yep, we do need to fix it. That's a good
Correct.
point. Thanks. Appreciate that.
I was gonna say it would read a little bit like, it seems to me that you want to know where your landscaping areas are before what's
Okay,
supposed to go in them, but
well, we can
it
move it.
doesn't, I don't think it really matters a whole lot. Then one right after the other. So
Well, and Tina, that's something I've always found odd with the Anchorage code, is that I always go to the second table before I go to the first one. So if that table was first, I think that would be consistent.
Okay,
That's funny. I love it.
so, okay, wait a minute. So we want the little black and white one, the heavy block first or second?
First, I would say
First.
first.
Okay, all right, I'll just remove it back. I'll put it back in
Keep
front of
it
you.
as 1 and
I think, what we're saying is I think that you look at where on the site you're required to do what, and then start looking into
Okay,
what needs to go into those areas.
that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
The one thing that wasn't talked about, and again, that's why it's here, was that this table talks about right of way, but the only differentiation in our code is for industrial properties that are on a local road versus any other road type. So I can go grab that, the language is in the text, and I can go grab it and put it in here, but I at least wanted to call it out that I think it would be helpful to talk about local versus other, even though for commercial and residential, it's gonna be exactly the same, no matter what type of road classification, it's only gonna be industrial, or I can do like Anchorage did. And they have a footnote dealing with their industrial properties, and I can just refer it to that, so.
Or you could do it right in the box and say L1, local road, L2, and something like that.
Right.
too.
that's,
So I just wanted you guys to know that I was gonna, separate that out and see if you had anything you wanted to add.
well, what if you just wrote it right in the box?
So I guess the question is, do we want to make different requirements on local roads?
Right.
Versus larger classifications?
And there aren't many commercial that are on local roads. It's the industrial is the only one that we've come across. And it's off Mystery.
Yeah.
Shaylin Drive is really the only one,
Okay.
unless we rezone some more along Lucas. But for now,
Who's gonna-
that is the only development. And most of those others are cul-de-sacs, which would be local roads. I think it's 34th Street, and there's a couple others off Lucas that are kind of industrial in nature. So that would apply to them too. It's just more of incorporating it into the table.
I guess. One. So L1 is the least amount of landscaping, right, for the tight areas. So that should go against the higher class for industrial. So local roads, do we want to increase the amount of landscaping required for a local road right away?
I don't know, we do.
Actually, I think it was my stand was, did you want to reduce it even more
Oh,
for industrial if they're on a local road because they're not visible? From
Do an industrial cul-de-sac. Do you really care?
What's the definition of?
I guess I was thinking if it's got residents on the other side, but I think we got that covered somewhere else, right?
yeah, that's buffering.
Yeah.
So this is talking about along the perimeter.
Right, and I was thinking the right of way. You got right of way facing, so you got industrial street side on one side of the street and a resident on the other side.
There's some, but I was looking, and it may have gotten lost in the translation and the updates.
Yes, yeah.
So it was. Okay, so the code has what it has for perimeter landscaping. But what it had was 2 exception or industrial zone lots with frontage on streets classified as local streets. So Misty, in answer to your question, it's a street classification that the city adopted. And that determines what the classification is. Like I said, almost all of our roads are either commercial, arterial, collector, whatever, or they're local. And so Mystery is a collector or an arterial, I'm not sure which. But Shaylin, which goes into that industrial park, is a local road. It's not classified differently. So they had lesser requirements. And then there was industrial was called out if you had frontage on streets classified as commercial, collector, arterial, or interstate actually is what we use for highway, but for whatever reason. And then they had higher standards there. And then there was an alternative for using fencing and things like that. So that was the one thing that never really rose to the top of the conversation of how to deal with our industrial, because there were just that one little small pocket. For now, it can stay the way it is, or it can be talked about. So that's why I kind of pulled it out. That was the one thing that I saw that really didn't.
Not sure if I.
Right.
No more than L1, I guess, what I'm saying. I guess, yeah, we could. I don't know.
And maybe,
Don't go back and forth.
Yeah.
Like to me, a local road should be more restrictive, but then on the same side, if it's all industrial on the local road, then it doesn't make
Who
sense.
cares? It's their driveway.
so I can always bring that up to the planning commission and let them see if they have any thoughts. Yeah.
But I mean, your exposure to it is pretty minimal.
It is. And what I thought was, rather than where I was going initially with the first amendment and then with potentially doing an amendment is, what if they put up a site obscuring fence or wall? Then is it okay if they just put grass and a tree every 30 feet? And I think that should be fine.
Yeah. Well, look at the likes of SBS. I mean, that's industrial. That's commercial, some commercial, that's what they do, but
Right.
it's laid out like industrial lot. But it does okay.
But it's on a highway, so.
Right, but I'm like, it's fine. My opinion.
But if we had it tomorrow, would we want it to be that way?
Absolutely not.
If it was brand new, a new one coming in across the street on the gravel pad, what would you want?
I understand. It's been here.
Yeah, no, yeah.
They used to get all the deliveries by train anyway.
Yeah, I can't think of a situation where it needs to be more restrictive. I mean.
No,
Yeah.
Let the next generation battle it out.
Yeah,
That's okay.
I think it is.
All right, we'll move past that one then.
Are you guys good with that, Peter?
Yeah, let the next generation battle it out. That's good. That's good.
That That one's just a numbering thing. This one, I think, is the next one. So let's see, what's the header? Oh, so this is screening, so not buffering, screening. So this is like, I'll go down to the chart. This is your service loading, offloading areas, your mechanical and electrical, your dumpsters, and your blank facade. So this is what you're dealing with here. So because they're now broken out separately, we have the purpose.
It also needs to be crossed out of the purpose then.
Huh?
This purpose still says screening and buffering.
Oh, got it. Okay. Yep.
Yep, good finish.
And then were there any applicability or exemptions that you could think of? We don't have to have them. I just put them there as placeholders in case there was any conversation about it before. So I will go and pull the table up because that's what you're talking about, basically. Those four. And I see there's a PB in that table also, a couple of them.
Might have to do a word search for PB.
And my PB note there really just related to the fact that utility companies are pretty specific sometimes of keeping vegetation, 10 feet away from the open side, that kind of thing. So we had briefly talked earlier about MEA. I don't think we've really integrated anything in here to be nice to be able to say, hey, coordinate this with MEA. We've just tried to have logical things. Should there be just a comment in this that any landscaping adjacent to equipment should be coordinated with the utility?
Wouldn't hurt to call it out. I think somewhere there's a disclaimer that says you still have to comply with everybody else's, but it probably wouldn't hurt to bring it back to their attention.
Stay in compliance.
That might be a good thing to add. I don't know if that would go in within the intent or where it might happen in the couple of sentences up above might be a good place to say that. Just in general for any utility stuff.
We can put it under applicability somehow.
Okay, yeah, I think that might make sense.
So to check with your utility companies, because it could be MEA, it could be MTA, it could be GCI, it could be.
And stuff.
And
Yeah.
All the ones you don't want to mess with. Heck, even water lines, those usually deep. Water and sewer usually deep.
Okay, got that noted.
But if you put a boulder on top of the clean out, you're gonna regret it.
So any exceptions that anybody can think of? I was trying to see. I mean, Peter, you have some additional requirements, but you don't really have any alternatives that came out of the conversations that captured in there.
No.
I don't think there's any exceptions. There may be some waivers, but the only way to deal with those, I think equitably, would be to say, go to the planning commission if it's something outside the norm. But that's just my thought.
Can't think of anything.
Unless you prescribe it out. So that it's not an opinion-based thing, it's a determination-based activity.
I guess
Nope, I guess. No, it's still not an exception. That's just more of a code. I noticed Anchorage had their dumpsters only had to be four-sided with opaque gates if the dumpster was visible from the right of way. Meaning like if you had it face on the back of your lot,
Borough has something like that.
something. They have rules about dumpsters, really?
Yeah, you have to have a enclosure and if it faces towards. Shoot, what is it? Is it something about, it faces towards the, away from the property or? It has to have gates, screen gates. I can't remember what the exact language is.
Are you talking about Anchorage code?
No, borough.
Okay.
So that would be the same in R1, just in the residential street, if somebody has a,
Well, the borough's a little different in that it doesn't have a standard code for several different types of development. I got a specific code for specific types of development. Like multifamily development requires a dumpster enclosure, but you don't have to have a gate on it if it's not facing away, if it faces into the property, I think is what it is. I can't remember exactly. But then like commercial development doesn't hardly has any code requirements at all. So it's really weird. Code.
how about just single family housing has a
There's
dumpster?
very little code, so if they don't have any
Yeah, the city doesn't have anything either. But
Residential.
yeah, they don't for single family or duplex. They do for multifamily. But technically, a dumpster is more industrial in appearance, so you could interpret the definition of industrial from a code compliance, but I doubt the city's ever gonna take that stance. The biggest thing we see is they're sitting in the right of way, so it's easy to say, at least push them back, get them on your lot. Stop putting them on our right of way, but. As we continue to grow, I think you'll see a push for that to go away, but it would kind of be like that landscape maintenance or grass maintenance nuisance stuff. Over time, you'll see there's a more demand for people to maintain what they have. If you have a lawn, mow it. If you don't have a lawn, that's great, but if you do, make it look like one. I don't know, but I'm not gonna propose that change. So we're gonna cross off exemptions for now, and then I guess if during the public hearings, if anything rolls to the top, be dealt with there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Only thing I could think that could potentially need an exemption would be, like, I'm just looking at right now, would be the loading areas, because they're not in a location that's not gonna cause an issue. Doesn't necessarily need to be screened, but again, it's kind of site specific, so.
Easy for you to say.
So,
Okay.
so it's specific.
There you go.
And then we have, let's see, yeah, I don't think we have anything there. Then there's where that buffering picks up. That's language that's already in the code. That's just. This is just the connection to the table, so that's not, that's the duplicates. That was just a typo. This one here, you guys didn't talk about. I don't think you would have any concern, but I did want to at least call it out under violations on page 105. It talks about under B, evidence of violation. So it already has the visual observation of active clearing or recent clearing, but it should also say missing and or dead vegetation, because that is a compliance issue. So this is a cleanup more for the code compliance officer for when he goes to court as to what establishes evidence. I don't know what other evidence you could have other than a photograph. I guess you could have a cutting off of the plant, but I don't think the judge will know what to do with it.
In my apologies for a second here. So just to confirm for the buffering, the previous couple pages, we had so the type B, type A, type C, those had been replaced by the table.
The L1.
So this section,
A lot of that can go away.
page 99 of 107, 99, 100. I think mainly go away or they supplement the previous information. And then I didn't necessarily know what to do with the Exhibit A and Exhibit B and Exhibit C still apply because they relate to the screening table we have. But I think buffering land use types, resident required buffering. So A, B, C, And even D maybe go away because they're replaced.
Or do they just need to say that they're L1, L2s, or,
They might be duplicative now, perhaps, but if you have a look at that,
okay,
because I think that anything that isn't spelled out should stay here, obviously, yeah.
right. Okay, I
Thank
have a
you.
note to check for duplicate information. Delete if in table,
We're talking about 99 all forward.
yeah.
Yeah,
think it's-
yeah, 99 and 100.
Yeah, that
The
whole-
rest,
So
The-
buffering between,
Black and white table is, was made to kind of clean all that whole thing.
Yeah, it's the table after. Nope, it's earlier. Yep, sorry, I think it's table 2, yeah.
Yeah.
So I know that there's no purpose, so you have to have that one.
there's no purpose.
And the exemption, yeah, no purpose.
That's the way
And
I
then
feel.
the exemptions need to be there, but it's the number 3, starting at the bottom of page 99 and rolling forward is what you're talking about?
I think so, yes.
Okay,
Maybe you just, you could put that table on right there. Yes, you.
yeah, I thought about breaking the table. Right now, there's a reference to the table, it takes you back to it.
Okay.
Man, table kind of, yeah, it's at the bottom of 100. I have, you see it in red there where I added a reference to it. But yeah, I can definitely look at these, see if they need to just go away. They may need to go away, or they may need to be, yeah.
Well, I think last meeting we had talked about having both verbal and tables, right?
There was some-
And tables.
There was a little bit of conversation.
Yeah, as long as they don't conflict with one another, this would be where, yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And I think, and just to reiterate, is when we looked at the type A, type B, type C buffers, there's a little bit of redundancy with them, so we wound up simplifying them just to be the L2 and the L3.
Yeah.
So this section, correlating it with that one, is hopefully not tricky.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be too hard. It's just a matter of going through it and setting the table out beside this text and then deleting out what you don't need.
Thank you.
No, thank you. So now we're back to the evidence of violation. That was
page,
on page 105.
This is violations for any part of the landscaping.
Yeah.
I think these edits make sense because it moves it beyond just being missing to making it, moves beyond active clearing because missing and dead vegetation also relates to being measured against an installed landscape plan.
Okay, and then that's it. That's all that I had. So unless the group had something in your review.
I think that I am good.
Last comment I had was about rock mulch, which we covered, so.
And then just for me to understand our procedure now, so for us to get to at least the 2 motions like Chris was speaking to for organizing this, we need to leave committee as a whole.
well, yes, we should first talk about what we're gonna talk about.
Okay.
So how I propose we handle this parliamentary wise is motion 1 remains motion 1. Motion 2 is still motion 2, but motion 3 becomes change, or motion 2 change 1.
Peter, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, your name just went down small and then Andy has a circle and you didn't have one, so I want to make sure we didn't lose you. Okay, sorry.
Oh, he's there in the middle. He's
Yeah, I
hold
see.
on.
This picture.
So change 1, change 2, change 3, change 4.
So
Motion
think,
2, is going to make a motion to approve the following
Yeah.
changes, right?
Changes.
And I think we only have, so motion 2 would only have 2 changes in it. The one is the insert the following new number 14 after 13, etc. And then the insert a number 3 on line 550, because the mulch motion and the fence motion have been removed.
We have the 50%. Was that not a motion or a change? I have it written at the bottom.
Make it, put it in there so that everybody knows it's 50% is very close.
Yeah.
Make that number
That was number
3.
three. So you have,
Three.
yeah, so you have change.
Just then nobody can go back and say, well, I didn't listen to this video. or that video."
And for the sake of having an accurate model motion, could you repeat that the wording for that 50% one, Tina, if you would?
Sure. What I have written down is rock mulch shall account for no more than 50% of the surface area within required landscaped areas or beds. Oh, do you need me to say it slower? Are you writing it down?
No, I got it. And I think that and what I have is what I'm going to end within required landscape areas, just to avoid any specificity of beds.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Everything refers to an area, so. Okay,
And then that is within 1633. Trying to track to the right paragraph. 1633.050, 1633.050. E, is it E?
yeah, I'll catch you in a minute. You probably beat me there.
E,
Oh, it's on page 83 of 107. It's ground cover, so it is,
or it's D.
yeah, it's D5.
D5C. Okay, thank you. And then just to reiterate again, so it looks like we have motion number 1, which relates to landscape architect being strike, or the or a professional being struck. And then motion 2 will have 3 items within it. Number 14 after line 13, insert number 3 in line 550, and the addition of the rock mulch quantification.
Great. You ready to hear the rest of how this worked parliamentarily? So first you have to move to approve our resolution serial number 2301, and then somebody has to make a motion to amend and do motion number 1. We vote on that, and then we do a motion to amend. And then changes 1 through 3. We vote on that. And then we vote to approve the resolution. We catch that?
As amended.
As amended, yes.
So make a move to make a motion to approve the resolution.
Yes.
Yeah, after we get out of the video.
Yeah.
And then we make a motion to make an attention to this.
So you move it second.
Yeah.
Then you make amendment 1.
Yeah.
And then move that second, and then we vote on it. That goes, so it goes.
Right.
And then the second motion is make changes 1 through 3.
Vote on it.
Second it, vote on it,
Then we vote on the whole thing.
and then we vote on the entire part.
Right.
As amended.
Yeah, and to confirm, so it's 2 motions within a motion.
2 amendments to the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, motion. Don't worry, we'll get there.
It's important.
It is because it makes it legal. So, well, for quasi legal, we are. No, we're legal. We're just quasi deliberative. Yeah. Any objections to exiting committee of the whole? Hearing none, we're now exiting committee of the whole. Need a motion to approve it. Yeah, that's where we're going.
No, I mean, you have to read the whole.
No, please don't. Just a resolution.
I move to approve resolution serial number 23-01.
I second.
All right. Moving second to approve resolution serial number 2301. Any discussion?
Yes. Make a motion to amend resolution 23-01.
To strike.
To strike the end of the sentence on lines 237 and 238 as indicated below. submittal of landscape plan that adequately indicates compliance with. Oh, no,
You can just say what your the
Strike.
words that you're
Strike.
striking.
It's just strike or a professional with similar landscaping experience as approved by the city planner. Somebody else can do the next one.
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay, we all have a second. All right, any discussion?
I will be abstaining from this as I am a professional landscape architect in the state of Alaska.
We'll take a vote. All in favor? Well, excuse me, any other discussion? The discussion. Any objections besides the abstention? Hearing none, I guess you'll approve. All right, now.
I would like to
motion.
make a motion. I would like to make a motion. I would move to a motion to make the following changes or amendments to the primary motion. The first one is to insert the following new number 14 after number 13 on line 246 as indicated below. Areas to be excavated or filled, proposed finished grades and contours, drainage, direction, any control structures to be installed unless shown on site plan. The second item that I'd like to change would be I move to insert number 3 on line 550 as follows: exemptions, unopened rights of way. And the third change would be to add to 1633050 D5C at the end of the paragraph to add rock mulch shall account for no more than 50% of the surface area in required landscape areas.
Second.
A second.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, any objections to the motion, the amendment as read? Hearing no objections, the amendment is read. Motion carries. Any further discussion to the resolution to approve serial number 2301 as amended? Hearing no discussion. No discussion. Any objections to approving resolution serial number 2301 as amended? Hearing no objection, the motion carries. All right, that's done.
Marie just texted me, let me know that she had been frozen for that. She just wasn't really still.
I was saying she
you-
holds the pose really well.
Are you? Yeah, Marie, that was amazing. Are you back on?
Oh. She's got a dot.
Yeah.
Look your dot. Are you still there?
We'll blame GCI.
I can't
Sure.
hear anything.
Hi, Marie.
Oh, hey, Marie.
You can hear now.
Can you hear?
I don't know what the heck's going on now.
I can hear you.
I'll
Oh, here, I can text her and say we can hear her.
before she says something evil about.
Oops. Oh, there it goes. Send quick message. Oh, he already beat the police
I
master.
can't
Wow.
hear anything.
Landscape committee.
You can't hear anything. Is she muted somehow?
Not if everybody else can
You
hear,
can see she's muted underneath her name.
but that's for her talking to us. We can hear her.
I can read your message, Peter, but I can't hear anything.
So your microphone works.
Mhm.
Does your listening device work?
Great.
Any objections?
No, I can hear you guys again.
Yay!
Good job.
Ugh.
So
Well, okay, so that carries. We are on to
Public comments.
public comments. Hello, public.
No public.
Thanks for the comments. Staff and committee comments.
Oh, you guys go first, but I have.
So I guess my only comment besides thank you all for your help. These are the go route, but here we are. That's some good work done. My question would be to the staff. What's next exactly? What's left?
So for this committee, there's nothing left, except for, if you want to attend the planning commission meeting. I know there was some discussion about someone or a couple someones being available at the upcoming meetings.
When is that meeting?
I can email the group. We're on May 9th for committee of the whole only. So someone may want to be there to, it is the second Tuesday of May at 6 p.m. in the council chambers.
You can probably.
So you can participate by phone if you're not able to make it in person. If somebody's wanting to do it that way, we have a call-in number. Or you could let us introduce the item first at that meeting, and then I don't know if there'll be a second one in May, but they'll definitely be on the June agenda for probably a more detailed discussion. So you could attend that or not, or we could always have them give questions if they have any in May, and we can forward it to the committee, and then you guys can.
Knowing what I know
Volunteer.
about these things and people, put it in there, but if one or two or four of us, whoever wants to show up, just shows up and says, hey, we put a crap ton of work into this. We'd appreciate you paying attention to it and recognize it's got some community support. We'll go a long way versus here's your packet. So I don't want to see all this work done by all these people and watch it fry. It's not okay. And then, that's all you need. It's about 3-4 minutes. Say hello, here's the thing, gotta go, bye. Thanks for your work.
And the other thing you can always do is, I guess, as individuals at this point, there's no reason. I don't know. I mean, you've got your reso that says that you support it. We always put it in the whereases that you guys have already held this many meetings. It's not like you did it one night, just, over pizza. Right. So, we always put that in the whereases and share that with them, but you're more than welcome to attend or not. Like I said, the first one's going to be the first time they see the draft. They may or may not have read it at that point. So there may not be a lot of questions at that one, but I would say if questions were going to occur, it'd probably be at the June one.
Right.
And then that's when, but I'll try and get them to get me questions ahead of time. If they have any, they may go, looks good to me, put it on for public hearing in June. And that could be the scenario. I mean, that's gonna be my recommendation, but they can do what they want to do.
Well, it's, council for sure, you'll show up and say, there it is. Pay
Right.
attention.
And
And I can keep you guys posted on to the meeting dates as they move along, the calendar.
That'd be great.
And when there is a draft for them, I'll distribute it or it will get it to the American Society of Landscape Architects, because I think it's appropriate for them to provide a letter of support if they so choose, since this did come out of one of the recommendations that they had. So
Okay.
I greatly appreciate the process, because I think that we've come up with something that moved beyond just making the code a little bit less expensive. So it's been nice.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
I agree.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So yeah, I guess the next thing is, I think we have 3 meetings or we have 4 meetings that this has to go through. We just have to planning twice and
It could do
Council
planning
twice.
once, but I just don't want to drop it on them as a public hearing. That's why I said it would
Right.
be just for committee of the whole discussion on May. The public could come and give comments, but it'll be during public comment versus the item. Put it for public hearing in June, try and catch the second city council for introduction, and then adoption the first one in July.
okay.
I mean, that's the goal, unless they cancel one for AML or something and, gets us pushed out, but
I'm gonna get their work done.
yeah. So it's to push it as fast as possible.
That's as fast as possible. Yeah.
So tell me if somebody asked, hey, are you ready for the building season? What is it?
It's in the hands of the city. Yeah. You can't do anything else to the rest of us. And it has to, legally has to go through public process or it is not valid law.
Right.
So
Now, what I am telling everybody that comes in for a project, we had Walmart come in, we have Ginger Basil's coming in with the development. We're letting anybody who's contacting us about a major project that they have the choice of. Right now, if they submit now, they have to submit with a landscape plan that complies with today's code. But when this gets adopted, if they want to amend their landscape plan to take advantage of the new code, they can. Depends on the size of the project. It may not pencil out to make it worth it, but it might. So we're giving them that option. That's what we did last time when we adopted it too. So, I mean, there is still an additional cost, but if it saved you 15,000 in landscaping, it's worth paying 2,000 or 5,000 for
For an
amended
amendment.
plan. They have that option, but right now, yes, anyone submitting now still has to go under the old code
Gotcha.
until it's adopted by the council.
I'm done with my comments. Anybody else?
So I was handed these this evening.
Oh,
So by the mayor, so I don't know if you guys can see, you get little certificates and a pin.
well, that's
The
nice.
pin says above and beyond. So for those of you who are not here, it'll be mailed to you. For those of you who are here tonight, and I'll just read it briefly. Says, and I agree with the mayor, this comes from her though, but so it means more, but I'm very appreciative of your committed service as a member of the Wasilla Landscape Committee. I'd like to thank you for the personal sacrifice you made to serve the city throughout your time on the committee. Your dedication to improving our community has been extremely valued. With the insistent support of citizens such as yourself, the city of Wasilla will continue to grow and prosper in the future. Once again, thank you for your service. And I agree wholeheartedly with her. So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
so, yeah.
Woot, woot, woot.
Interesting.
And with that, are we at where we can do a motion to adjourn or?
Oh, they have to move. Nothing else to do. It's on the agenda. We're adjourned.
There we go. Thank you all. We'll see you when we see you.
All right, thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
Some years.
Good
All right.
night.